Yep.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. We're going to get started in just about a minute or two. We'll allow folks to go ahead and log in. So thank you for your patience while we do that. We'll just give folks about one more minute. Hopefully everybody's having a great day. I'm super excited to talk about GA4 and TapClicks today, so we'll get started here shortly. All right, we're getting some folks joining. Welcome, everybody. Give it a few more seconds here. All right, good. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for taking time out of your day to join TapClicks Smart Tech on the topic of GA4. So today we're going to go through a presentation with Brian Butler, who is the owner of Smart Tech. My name is April Dozat. If I have not had the pleasure of meeting you in the past, I am the head of our customer success team here at TapClicks, and I thank you for your business. So what are we going to talk about today? Today, our agenda is that we are going to talk about GA4 versus Universal Analytics. We're going to walk through sort of the landscape and how TapClicks Connector seamlessly fetches data from GA4. We're going to explore discrepancies, talk about how TapClicks can really help with discrepancies utilizing GA4 property data. We'll dive into our on-demand connectors as well. And of course, we're going to talk about how TapClicks' GA4 on-demand template and the advantages that we have over GA4's own UI. We'll round out with an open forum. This is your chance to ask questions. So please do take advantage of that. We want to make sure that we get your questions answered and that we are a valuable resource for you. So go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A. And we'll go through those at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I am going to go ahead and hand it over to you, Brian.
Wonderful. All right. Hello, everyone. So my name is Brian Butler, as April had mentioned. I am the CEO of Smart Tech, which is a marketing technology consulting firm. We specialize in everything marketing consulting, including TapClicks. GA4 is definitely one of the many services that we support. And we do support that for a lot of the TapClicks clients, TapClicks customer support team members. And we're excited to be able to chat with you guys today about this. I will say this is going to be somewhat entry level kind of conversation about GA4, directly angled around its integration with TapClicks specifically, as April had mentioned in the agenda. So for those of you who might be looking for a more of a senior level or inner executive level kind of deep dive into GA4, we can definitely have that conversation. You can reach out to me at brian@smarttech.company. We can have that conversation anytime. This is going to be a little bit more direct and a little bit more focused. So for you who may have already seen one of our previous webinars, just be aware that we're going to be doing a little bit of going over some of that content again. So if you're looking for really advanced type stuff, let's reach out, have a conversation. But for those of you who are brand new, this is going to be super valuable to a lot of people. And I am lucky enough to get to talk to a lot of clients who are TapClicks clients and GA4 clients. And I've been able to get a bit of a better understanding as far as what some of the needs are when it comes to what it is you guys are looking for out of GA4 and in TapClicks, how that's going to apply. So very excited to really kind of talk about that. But that's who I am. And again, we specialize in marketing technology. So everything from HubSpot to TapClicks to GA4, that's our specialty. And we help take care of the stuff that people hate doing, basically. Now, April, do we have any initial questions for the GA4 versus UA just to start with that we can go over? Do we want to kind of just go into kind of the summary as far as how we see the difference?
I think we can start with the summary, if you don't mind, Brian, and then we'll see these questions as they come rolling in.
Sounds like a plan. Um, so GA4 is one of those elements that we have now seen it rolled out to majority of people. Unlike some of the other webinars we've done where it was kind of coming or had just been launched, it's pretty well established right now, and we're definitely seeing GA4 being seen as the primary in a lot of instances, and GA/UA has now been starting to be deprecated in those instances. So I would say the first thing to talk through is if you haven't had a chance to go in there and take your old audiences, do the migration process, you would want to log into your GA/UA and start the migration process if you haven't done it yet. Setting up the GA/UA account to make sure that your audiences, your users are all going into GA4. There is a couple of quick processes the system will show you. There's also some functions that GA has automatically done for you. So be mindful of that. But when you're going in there, just making sure step number one, get that into the system. I'd say the second thing to look at is understanding if you've had GA4 set up for a while, when did you set it up? And when are you considering kind of your source of truth as far as the changeover from GA to GA4? The main reason I say that is because in TapClicks, we have some really great functionality for blended data. But if you are looking at GA4 and GA/UA data at the same time, you're going to have that data be layered because a lot of people have had GA4 set up for 2 years, right? And so the impressions, a lot of those metrics can actually be duplicated in the way where you're not even going to recognize that that's there. And so be mindful of that because that is something where as we go into some of the more, maybe in-depth kind of conversation, you're going to want to know kind of what your source of truth is. Like when are you cutting off GA data and when are you bringing in GA4 data and what's that line in the center where those data points meet? And that way you don't have a ton of overlap in your data. Most of the conversations we have with people, it's going to be around that July 1st, June 31st kind of date range, which is when everything started to be deprecated on the Google side and Google started really kind of reinvesting into the product. Here. So as far as the system and kind of how everything works into the TapClick side, if everyone hasn't already connected their GA4 instance into TapClicks, one of the first things you want to do is make sure you're going in there and making the basic connection. That's kind of a standard practice for everybody who uses TapClicks, but it's important to let you guys know that not everybody has done that yet, right? And so get in there, make sure your connection is made, make sure the details are synced up, make sure your clients are connected. You're going to notice that the data that you receive in there is going to be standardized at looking back about a year. And that's the initial pullback window. The initial data does have the ability to pull back information in GA4 up to 14 months. And Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong on that. But the first 14 months can be pulled in of background data or backlog data. And then for your GA instance, if you haven't talked to your CSM about it yet, there is the functionality of bringing in data from your UA edition for multiple years so that you can bring that into the TapClicks data lake, have TapClicks store that information so that you can have that available on demand. And that is a really important feature of the service because you do get the ability to kind of avoid having to go the BigQuery way and store that data via BigQuery. You can just store it via TapClicks. Their data lake is going to be able to hold that data, access it, and then making sure that that's available to you on demand as needed. And there's also, of course, live captures for GA4 that you can bring that data in as well. But so pretty exciting, and really TapClicks has stepped up to make sure that you don't have to be a BigQuery expert to not lose all that data. Because we do foresee that Google's going to be deprecating the entire GA/UA instance in the near future. So that data you're going to want to log and keep in the data lake as long as you can. With that, Catherine, did you have anything specifically from a product side that you want to advise when it comes to that backlog or anything that you guys have seen, especially with the newer updates happening in GA4 and such?
The biggest thing I will say is they're still actively developing on their side, on the Google side of the fence. So every day could potentially bring new data points or new, dimensions or attributes, basically just anything new on your data set. So as the API evolves from the Google perspective, TapClicks' integration to the Google product will also evolve. We're never stagnant. Everything is evolving as we go. We do have various structures put into place that we can move quickly on certain requests for clients. If you guys haven't heard of, the DIYs and things like that, we've spoken about them before on previous webinars. You can always reach out to your CSMs. They're very knowledgeable in April's organization. They can always help guide you on that as well. But the data is always going to be robust. It's Google, let's be real. It's never going to stop being robust. We just want to make sure that TapClicks is here to partner with you in order to get that data how you need it. And that's really comes down to your true experience and your custom experience that you've built out, as Brian was saying, through the different configurations of your GA4 accounts.
Definitely. Let's see. We had a couple questions come in, it looks like, from Lorenzo. Is TapClicks integrate first through GA4 or GAM? I was told that TapClicks can integrate through GAM. Can we go over how TapClicks is connecting with Google? Thank you.
So
GAM,
this is more
does anyone
of
recognize that metric?
This is a me. So GAM is actually Google
Okay.
Ad Manager. We affectionately call it the GAM integration.
Gotcha.
It's an abbreviation. For those of you who are like me, been around for a while, Google Ad Manager is the former DFP product, the DoubleClick for publishers. So that product we have a direct connector to the Google Ad Manager APIs. It's a very robust connector on our side. What I will say is our GA4 data connector is direct to the GA4 APIs. It does not pipe through Google Ad Manager, so they are completely separate. In fact, every single one of our Google Suite connectors are distinct APIs. They are not piped through each other in order to get the data into TapClicks. Now, that's not to say that you can't do the cross reporting. You know what I mean? So Google allows you to get, for example, in analytics and UA, historically, you could get AdWords data or ads data as it's called now. That still exists in GA4. And you still can report on those fields that are there in the API that are ad specific. So it's not to say that you can't report on that information. If it's available in the API, we can get it. But the way TapClicks builds all of our integrations are direct one-to-one to the APIs. We're not using one API to source all of the information. If that helps.
That's a good answer. Yeah, and unfortunately, you guys are somewhat limited behind what the APIs can actually pull in. And Google Analytics GA4, I think, is a good example of that. I mean, you guys have been, trendsetters in the GA4 connector. You've had one of the first connectors for GA4 on the market. And a lot of the data that was available wasn't even available via API once the Google GA4 system was pushed live, which was really interesting because like, okay, now it's live, but like we're still missing like a huge amount of, the differences and the changes there. So it's really interesting to see kind of how that plays out and what that looks like, because you guys were ahead of it. And even then,
it's definitely it's been an evolution, our connector. And Brian, you've definitely seen all of it as we've gone through the iterations over the last couple of years. You've been with us hand in hand, kind of. So we started off, I want to say back in 2019, building out this connector. So it's been almost 4 years that we've had a connector to the GA4 data set. And like you said, it was very slim. It was very trim. There wasn't much there. Wasn't much known about the data set yet because it wasn't very widely adopted as of yet. It was still a property type. It wasn't necessarily its own thing yet. As it evolved and as their API expanded, we too expanded. And now we are capable of reporting on any field, be it dimension or metric that the API has, but the API has to have it. So for those of you who know GA4 as well as the other systems that you're using, it can become apparently obvious that there are some fields that are in the UI in the Google don't necessarily exist in the API. And that is where TapClicks and the team can help spread information and share the information and help replicate.
All right. That's great. Thank you so much, Catherine. I really appreciate that. I think our next topic is actually one that I'd love for you to kind of kick off and help us understand a little bit more of, which is exploring data discrepancies and how TapClicks tackles those data discrepancies using GA4 property data. Catherine?
Yeah, sorry, brain. I was thinking through my answer and I paused. I apologize. Yeah, so data discrepancies, they are always a pain in the butt, right? Let's be real. When you go to do your reporting, you never want to see a data discrepancy. And as you know, the product manager here at TapClicks over data connectors, I never want you to see a data discrepancy. However, there are some cases where they're just inherent based on the data and how it's provided to us. So when it comes to GA4, the data model that they have chosen to use is much different than the universal analytics data model. It's more event-based. It's all kind of, you have to set up your custom parameters. It's very much an individualized format. And with that comes some intricacies. And they've also changed the way they handle the base aggregation of I won't say a lot, but a good majority of those really reporting heavy metrics, like your sessions, your users. It's not ideal for reporting. So you will see if you're pulling data in through our Instant On connector, which is all data that gets stored in the data warehouse for you to use in the TapClicks platform, you may notice, and you likely will definitely notice, discrepancies when you look to report on session data in an aggregate manner. So if you're looking over a date range, the data is going to look inflated. The reason this is because the data is now considered unique. So a session is no longer the minute you click on a website and then click away, that session is done. That's one. It's now a timed thing. So you click on a website, you land on a landing page, and you have a window now where you are considered a session. That window, depending on where you are, where you land in the time zone, where you land in the time of day, this could span multiple days. So that gets tricky when you do reporting the way TapClicks does reporting, and it duplicates. We can go way into depth on that. If you need more in-depth answers on that, feel free to reach out. We can go really into the weeds on it. But from a high level, what TapClicks likes to do to help combat that is we have alternate reporting paths. So we have best practices around how you can choose to report within the system using that stored data warehouse data, where you can report on a daily interval, and the daily values will match. The aggregate total of those daily values will not line up. However, because Google dedupes, we do not, but those individual daily values will line up. We also offer monthly aggregate data views now for specific data sets. So we have data views that now you can sort of report on a daily aggregate. You can look and see the month aggregate. So on a monthly basis, they will be accurate. If you do month-end reporting, that it could be beneficial for you. We also offer something called on-demand connectors. On-demand connectors, or formerly known as our live connectors, these are ad hoc API calls where users can go into TapClicks, configure a list of dimensions and metrics. You can use one of our predefined data sets, or you can use the custom data view, where you can pull whatever you want, which includes your custom dimensions and metrics, which is always valuable. Also, custom channel groupings as well. So you can pull all of that stuff in there, and you can make an ad hoc API call. So what the API will do is we'll call in that moment for the totals, for the data that you've just defined. And as long as that API request is accurate and a valid request to the API, you will get data back. What I will say is, if you do supply something that's invalid, we'll get an error message back telling you it's invalid and why it's invalid. So there is some handling there that would help. But that is definitely something that is an option for sure.
Awesome. Okay, so
Catherine,
it looks like we have, oh, sorry. Go ahead,
just
Brian.
a follow-up to Catherine's statement there. So one of the things that we've seen in conversations about this is that because of those aggregation discrepancies, it makes it challenging for GA on-demand data to appropriately roll up when used in channels. Can you talk a little bit about how the channels react to Google Analytics 4 data? Because that's been a topic that has come up a couple of different times as far as the discrepancy differences, how those different change, when it's best to use GA4 data in a channel, or is it best to use it as a live metric outside of a channel? I think it'd be really fascinating for the people who are watching to kind of recognize how best practice it would be to approach that question.
Yeah, so from our perspective of channels, what I will say is, as of right now, our on-demand connectors do not work with channels. They are completely independent as of right now, but that is where it stands as of right now. If you're looking to report on your UA data and then your GA4 data in a channel, you can definitely do that. What I would say is use the feature within our channels product that allows you to put date bounds. So if you know that all of your properties migrated on July 1st of 2023, on that forced migration date, use that as your cutover so that you're not seeing the data in two places. So you're not getting that lingering UA data plus the new GA4 data overlapping and then duplicating.
Yep.
That can cause a discrepancy like you mentioned earlier. So if you use that date bounds, it says use UA data up until this point and then start GA4 here and moving forward. So that would be one thing I would say in channels if you're going to do it. Now, what I will say is the data is fundamentally different.
Yes.
The way it's stored on the Google side of the fence, the way they aggregate their data, it is fundamentally different. So it is not necessarily fair to put those two data sets in the same channel and assume them to be the same, because they're not. That's like saying your advertising platforms, your ad platform data is the same as your e-commerce data. It's just very different. So you need to remember that and be prepared for that and be able to speak to that when your clients come to you and be like, why is this not lining up? Or why do you have different fields for different things? It's because they truly are different fields. Not every universal analytics field migrated into GA4. So there is a good difference there, which can cause confusion and perceived discrepancies.
That's great. Thank you. Very insightful, Catherine. It looks like we have some questions coming in, so I'm just going to go ahead and ask them kind of in real time here, I think. So someone is asking if we can pull in our UTM fields. Can we pull in our UTM fields?
Yeah, you should be able to pull in your UTM fields so long as they're valid API, fields. I believe they are. To be honest, off the top of my head, I don't know what they're called in the API, but I believe they're present. We can pull any number of fields, whether they be custom fields and things like that you've configured on your own, but we can pull them both in stored and in live.
Field? Oh, okay, both and both.
Okay. Both. Yeah, we now have support for custom metrics and dimensions and custom channel groupings across the board.
Thank you, Catherine. I don't know, Brian, should we move on to maybe the next topic, or we do also have some additional questions? So you tell me.
Let's see how I look on time. I think a couple questions would be fine.
Okay.
The next topic is pretty dense.
Okay, you got it. So someone is asking here, we use internal names for our events, but want to make them more user-friendly for our customers. Can we change the names of our events in TapClicks without making changes in GA4? I'm not sure who's best to answer that one.
I don't know that I would know on the admin side of TapClicks, right? the data you have in GA4 is going to be mapped as the API brings it in. And so for Catherine's team, I would assume there has to be an element where they have to translate that either with a channel or in the backend.
So as it comes through is how it comes through. I know in the past, when it comes to, say, metric names, you can use our calculations feature functionality to make a more friendly name for a field if you want. However, data in that we get from the API is what data in is. We don't currently do like any renaming. What we will do is there is a level of processing on the event names that we do where we remove the underscore between words and put a space instead. We'd use the capitalization and things like that. But that is about it as of right now.
All right. Thank you. All right. So I want to take a minute to remind folks to go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A feature, and we will go ahead and answer them for you. So we can go ahead and move on to the next topic. And then we can round out with some questions at the end. And as a reminder, our next topic is, oh, we did talk about on-demand connectors, didn't we? All right. Is there anything else that you want to talk about regarding on-demand connectors? Brian?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things we can show. I'm kind of a visual person, so I'll share my screen real quick if you're okay with it, and just kind of show some of the data when it comes to those visual connectors, like on-demand connectors, and also showcase the live connectors, because that's some of the questions I've had in my independent conversations, is really kind of recognizing where to do some of this. So I have a couple examples pulled up just as a point of reference. Again, being a very visual person is kind of how I work. So one of the things that is really great about the TapClick system when it comes to GA is the ability to really kind of visualize this in a way that separates things out in a very logical manner. Luckily, the team at TapClicks did create a really great dashboard. If you haven't seen it yet, go to your sections and look for GA4. There's going to be a really like a template or an overview here. And this has been updated a couple of times. So if you have an older version, you may want to check the new template and see kind of your thoughts on it. There's a lot of really good information in here that you can pull in. The one thing I will say is that some of the data that is in the initial template can be modified so that it looks a little bit more like your Google GA4 instance. So in my own instance, I've actually taken like an e-commerce example, and I've changed out the initial to focus more on a baseline using properties data versus a different one. I think it was an acquisition data in the original template. And for me, a lot of our clients come to us and they're trying to look at your GA4 and they're trying to look at GA4 in the actual instance, and they want to compare one-to-one. And some of the challenges that we've had is people have been having a hard time seeing what they're seeing in GA4 and recognizing kind of where that lives in the template. So that's one of the things I do recommend is really, there's a really, the properties view has a lot of the functions and a lot of the viewpoints that are going to mirror what you have in GA4. So when you log in, and there's the very basic introductory reports that you get in GA4 with your sessions, your new users, your engaged sessions, conversions, total revenue. A lot of these metrics aren't in the initial template, but if you're looking to mirror what you have, the properties data view is going to be your go-to for that. So that's one element that I recommend. And the other recommendation we also have when it comes to building these out is there's a lot of widgets that are a lot of data that's better off in the live call widgets. If you haven't seen a live call widget on here yet, if you go into any of your widgets really, or if you create a new one, the way you would go about that is you have in the top here your sample data, or sorry, under your sample data, you have your data cloud. This is where you're going to either turn on or turn off your stored data versus your live call data, and recognizing that there is a huge difference in all the metrics available in the live call. You may be looking for something that is available, but you don't necessarily recognize it's available because you haven't turned off the data cloud and dug into that live call widget. So I always like to recommend this. I think it's important. If you go to the TapClicks connectors page, this is kept up fairly well, at least in my experience. And the team at TapClicks does a really great job of making sure there's a way of recognizing what data is available. And so as we're talking about stored versus on demand, your dimensions that are available to you that you can use to build are going to be referenceable at the very top here. And just scrolling down, you can quickly see kind of an example of how many data sets and how many points of data are available in here. One common one that is not available in the stored data is typically going to be e-commerce item level data. And it's not something that's available in the stored information. So you may be looking to build an e-commerce report and you're going, what's happening? I'm pulling my hair out. Well, that's where you're going to want to look at the on-demand, because the on-demand, just scrolling through here, you're going to very quickly see that this list is 10 times longer than the stored data. And that sheer data availability is going to be one of the main reasons why you're going to want to leverage the live data, because the challenge is that your live data won't go back as far because you don't quite have the same level of look back window as you do, for example, on a stored widget, but you do have the ability to pull in some of the data from like today or yesterday, which gives you a little bit more real-time information, which is one of the biggest features that I have seen requested with working with different TapClicks clients. So this really does help to mitigate that. And I do feel like a lot of the people I've talked to don't recognize that this live feature, the on-demand, is even available. So I really wanted to point out, as we talk about GA4, just the power of going into this on-demand side, going to the connector and really digging in to see what metrics are available to you so that you can have a better understanding of how you're going to achieve certain reports that you're trying to mirror, maybe what you used to do in GA, but now you're trying to do it in GA4. And as an example of where you would pull that, just for those who haven't seen this yet, as you go to your data widget on a new widget, if you unselect the data cloud, it's going to change the entirety of this widget so that you can actually bring in, again, this is going to be Google Analytics 4. There's a lot of data categories that do have the live data available to you. Not every source does, but a lot of them do. And as you dig into here, you're going to see your live data brings in different data views. You will set your assignment inside of here at a different position. And then you'd also have your live metrics, your dimensions, and all the filtering is actually done within this part of the widget, not in the external part of the widget like you do in a stored data widget. So you do have to filter very differently, but your filter has a very similar wildcard functionality as the typical feature. Catherine, anything you want to add to that from a context standpoint that people should know when looking at using a live widget versus a data cloud versus a stored data?
Yeah. So one thing I will point out is Brian mentioned that we don't have like the e-commerce, the item level data. And then you'll see other various gaps between what's available for stored versus what's there for on demand. What I will call out is that's what's available by default. Doesn't mean it's all that's available. We can definitely work to build out whatever data sets you need for stored. It's just inherently available in the on demand in a more kind of dynamic fashion. Every metric and dimension that is available in the API, we try to make sure is available in the on-demand connector. So like Brian said, they'll all be here. It's a much more robust kind of view. What I will also call out is for the filtering, while you can filter in the widget configuration and it is a much different experience, you can also do filtering now post-save. So if you make this API call and you save this widget, it makes the API call, the data gets returned, and you can now do filters through the normal filtering functionality. It's something that we released very recently, and it basically helps standardize the filtering experience across all of our 40 on-demand connectors that may or may not have filtering available in the APIs themselves inherently. It's more of a standardization feature that we try to put out there to make sure that everyone could do the same things.
All right. Anything else, team, that you'd like to add on that topic? Or those topics, I should say. All right. Looks like we have some questions coming in. Can you blend live data with stored data? It's a bit of a tricky question.
Not that I have seen. My understanding is that live data and stored data are kind of two separate buckets. And so I would think that if you're looking at building, like for example, a channel, I'm not aware, and obviously Catherine can confirm this, but I'm not aware of any ability to build a live data point into a channel. So, and then the blending, as far as taking your blended dates, and finding kind of the match rate where you're stopping the data from coming on one day and finding that source of truth where you're blending like GA and UA. If you're doing a blend, it would need to be in a channel, and channels can only be done with stored data. So you would not be able to do a GA and GA4 blend because you have to use stored data in a channel. It's kind of a one-to-one. If you have to use a channel, and then you have to use stored data, and the live data would only be able to be leveraged for a independent, kind of singular widget. And it also takes a little while longer to load as well. It's not an instantaneous load in because it's not stored in the cache of the data lake. And so there is an element of data there that you have to recognize that it's like, making a live call request and waiting a little bit to get the answer, like almost like a CB radio, right? It's not an instant, text message. It takes a little bit of time. Whereas if the data is stored and it's easily accessible, there's no lag in the communication line. So you can store that data, match the data, blend the data because of the fact that it is a stored data set and it doesn't have the latency that a live call would.
All right. Thank you so much. Does anybody else, Catherine, to add to that? We're good?
No? What
All right.
what
Okay.
Brian said is completely accurate. What I will say is keep your eyes peeled. In 2024, we're looking to make updates.
Yes. Yes. Looking forward to that for sure. Awesome. So question here. I had no idea these on-demands. He had no idea about the on-demands, it sounds like. So what all dimensions and metrics do you recommend I have where my boss wants to know all the impressions and page visits on our website per our categories: business, real estate, lifestyle, etc.?
Are those categories broken out into a custom dimension? That would be my initial question, because the categories would have to be a recognizable field inside your GA4 for it to be brought in and then visualized. And so I would say if you have a custom dimension that you have broken out so that you have pages or page categories broken out, as long as it's a field that has data, you should be able to visualize that and break out that data. So you could have your categories and then next to it, your impressions, your bounce rate, your all those kind of metrics. But you still have to have the parameter of categories in a capturable function. I'm not aware of business categories being an auto-filtered or auto-created metric inside of GA4. So the question, I think, would have to have a delineator on that. And that is a good question that we may want to have a discussion about as far as custom dimensions, custom metrics. Are you creating custom dimensions? How do you create custom dimensions? So there may be a future follow-up required for that, because it doesn't seem like you'd be able to leverage that using default data in GA4.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian. Okay. Let's see. Any other questions coming through? Let's take a look here. Put your questions in the Q&A if you have any, folks. Be happy to answer them.
I'd say one bit of a tip that I would give people right now with GA4 is to kind of be diligent in watching the updates. One thing I will say that I'm somewhat impressed by is that Google Analytics has actually continued to invest in the product, and the Google Analytics team, I should say, has continued to invest in the product to the point where the last couple of webinars I've had with you guys, we've made a point instead of talking about custom calculations has been deprecated from GA4, where it was in GAUA. As of recently, that's actually been added back in. It's a newer feature. So you can now do custom calculations. So if you want to create a cost per acquisition for a specific conversion or cost per acquisition for a specific custom metric, you can now do that inside of GA4. And if that calculation creates a column or creates a metric, and Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong on this, that custom column, custom metric should be able to be imported into TapClicks so you can use that in your visualization. Is that accurate, or is the logic not there yet?
So we would need to build out the support for those custom metrics, but because we've done custom dimension, like the custom calculations piece, if they come through as custom metrics, they're inherently there. We'll be able to get them. But if they're a different subcategory in the Google API, we would need to double check. I'd need to fact check the API. But it's good to know.
Fair. Yeah,
All
and
right.
I do think there's still value in using the calculated fields inside of TapClicks. The question, as you look at that, will have to be determined: are the fields available in the TapClicks system and the fields available in the GA system, are they equivalent with what you're trying to calculate? Like for me, custom calculations are oftentimes getting a little bit deeper, or like I'm trying to look at one specific goal and breaking out that goal in a way where I can see a specific CPA from that goal. And that goal action is sometimes not available as a metric, say in TapClicks, right? So you do have to determine whether the calculation you're trying to do is full of 2 metrics that are in GA4 as well as TapClicks, or those metrics that are not initially in TapClicks, and you'd have to have the team build those in as a custom build. So that's something to be mindful of, at least.
All right. So we've got some more questions rolling in. This one, let's see. What is the purpose of the stored connector if the live connector seems to be more accurate?
For me, I would say that the fact that the stored connector has data that is able to go back further and has a longer look back window available to you than you would have in the live connector. GA4, for example, has been around for 2 years, but there's a 14 month look back window in the live call widget, whereas on the stored widget, you do have access to pull back pretty much the entirety of that data and then reference it if needed. Whereas there is limitations with the live call widget. That's one of the main things I would think about. The other factor is that the live call widget takes longer to pull because it's a live instant on. And then again, you cannot use channels when you're trying to combine data and a live connector. Stored data is what you're going to be required to use. So I think the purpose of stored connectors versus live connectors, it changes depending on your use case, but there are definitely advantages to having both.
Great. And I want to remind folks as we walk through this and have this discussion today that, there may be questions that you want to dive deeper into, and you want to have a live conversation, sort of one-on-one, right, with one of our specialists. Please do reach out to your CSM. Or you can definitely send an email to customercare@tapclicks.com, and we'll definitely get someone to respond back and get you the help that you need. All right. Are there any more questions? Let's take a look here.
A couple.
Let's see. I don't see more, Brian, at this moment.
There was one that came in about, can you blend in channels and using the calculator? So I think that it's a good question to ask. Like, if you are doing a Google Analytics channel where you're trying to take GA4 and GAUA in one channel and have like a stream, like a one constant stream of consciousness of data, right? As long as your data has a good cutoff date where GA is the source of truth on this timeline, GA4 is the source of truth on this timeline, and then with that matter, once you've created that channel, those data points do blend. So sessions will be, you can have that one consistent message. It is, very viable to say that session data, for example, is different. It's not the same metric in GA and GA4. You should probably tell your clients that. But if you want to just have that be a metric you can look at, you can do that. And if those data points that you're bringing in and you're able to find like goals, or you're trying to find different metrics that evenly match, you can use the calculations field to create custom calculations for that channel, which is great.
All right. So let's see. We are at about a quarter till, so we have 15 more minutes. We'll allow folks to ask questions here, but we do have a couple of TapClicks folks on the call listening, and certainly would love if there are any questions that you would like to ask sort of on behalf of your TapClicks customers, please do let us know. We would love to cover those topics as well, and put it right in the Q&A. All right. Well, we may be nearing the end, team. So, oh, one just popped in. Okay, so you don't know what you don't know. What's a good training resource for me to see how to better implement some of the integrations with GA4 and TapClicks, better understand the integration? And I would say, first and foremost, like I said, do reach out to your TapClicks CSM on that one, and we could set you up with one of our internal specialists, as well as, of course, we rely heavily on Brian and his team to bring their expertise to the forefront. So certainly we will rely on Brian if there's certain things that we can go ahead and get him on the phone for. So reach out to your TapClicks.
I would say with that, leveraging the report that has already been built and creating a copy of it that you can go in and just kind of play around with. You're not going to know what's available in the system until you have some trial and error. Even as an expert in GA, everything is trial and error. I will say there's something that we also use in the field that you may find valuable. And I can pull it up real quick and see if this is Google Analytics. There's a tool that we use. So let me show a quick tool that I think people might find value in. And I can tell you, I use this tool when doing implementations with clients, and we're trying to build, kind of an if this, will this work kind of functionality. And just for the measure of good faith, I want to show, kind of a good example of this. But if you're going to, there's a tool called GA Dev Tools. I usually look at it by looking at the Google URL builder. I love this function because what you can do is you can select GA4 and you can do a query explorer. And what Query Explorer does is it does a preliminary API call that mirrors what it is the product team has to do. So if you're wondering, can I combine, I'm going to use a weird example here, but can I combine oil and water? Okay, well, let's plug oil and water into the properties here. And does it work? Okay, in this case, it doesn't work. Okay, can I combine oil and sugar? That may not work as well, but I can combine water and sugar, right? You kind of have to think about it where different data points in different dimensions sometimes have different tracks. I usually consider this as an example. If you think of how website data works and how Google app data works, app visits and app data is like the plumbing in your house, right? And then website data is kind of like the electrical in your house. They're two different data streams happening in the same environment. And if they cross, there's disastrous results, right? You don't want your plumbing and your electrical to connect. That shouldn't happen. And there's a lot of data inside Google Analytics that lives in a plumbing string, and a lot of data that lives in a electrical string. They don't necessarily flow together. They flow individually, they flow past each other, but they don't necessarily work together. And I hope that analogy is making sense, because when you're thinking about data in GA and how that data connects, you really have to start to understand there are metrics that do not work with other metrics in a report. There are dimensions that do not work with other dimensions in a report. So you may be trying to pull information where you're trying to understand how a certain page works along with a certain metric. So let's say that you want to see bounce rate and you want to see it at a landing page level, or you want to see e-commerce conversion rates at a landing page level. What I would recommend you do is come into this tool, the GA Query Explorer, pull in your account, pull in the time frame, and you literally are building a query just as if you're doing an API call. You can punch in the metric you want, so whether that's revenue, whether that is average purchase revenue. If you want to look at your dimensions, you can literally see all the dimensions that average purchase revenue is going to be in the same track on, right? So you can look at average purchase revenue by day. You can look at average purchase revenue by event name. But you may see that the dimension that you want is not in here. And if you do, that is just a situation where the data and the metrics are conflicting and they don't flow in the same data train. They're not in the same data path, right? And so you can usually come in here and do a good example of what you're looking at. And once you have built that, it is going to populate a JSON file that you will see exactly what the API populates. And if you need, I want this plus this plus this to create a report that looks like this, this file, this JSON request can be copied, sent to the product team and the technical team and say, hey, essentially, this is what I'm looking to do. I want to create a report or a custom metric or a custom field that brings these things together to create this beautiful report. Here are the fields. I've already verified that it works together in the same data stream. Let's go ahead and see if we can build this into a widget. But these data points are going to validate, one, that the data and dimensions you're looking for are compatible. And two, it gives the developers and the engineers who are trying to build this custom a better understanding of what the actual code looks like to accomplish what you're asking. And this is a little more complex, but I think it's able for anybody who is playing with reports and GA to understand what's possible. This tool will literally be fail-safing, the request you're making so that you're not getting frustrated. Why can't TapClicks do this? Well, it's because it's oil and water. They don't blend, right? And if you haven't seen this tool yet, I highly recommend playing with it. It is really wonderful. It's also really helpful in trying to troubleshoot enhanced e-commerce functionality. If you're trying to make sure that your e-commerce data points are firing accurately and correctly. So very, very cool tool. I would highly recommend exploring this a little more because it can honestly save you and the engineers you're trying to work with a ton of time and a ton of headache.
And what
That's
I will
wonderful.
say is TapClicks also has a video walking people through how to use the Query Explorer. If you haven't seen it or you can't find it, please do reach to your CSMs. They know where to find it.
Thanks, guys. That's great. All right. So more questions have come in. So what is the biggest practice advertisers should adopt when using GA4?
The biggest practice or the best practice? I would say the biggest practice I would say is setting your expectations correctly. So how do I say this in the right way? So everyone's aware that third-party cookies are being deprecated at a very fast rate. And for those of you who don't know, starting in January, Google is going to be deprecating 5% of all third-party cookies in Google Chrome. If you don't know what that means, let's have a conversation because you're going to want to know what it means. But third-party cookies are the things that third-party advertisers like Facebook, any pixel you have on your site, any data that's on your site that's collecting information and passing that along. And thanks to the UK and all the things that are happening in the GDPR type stuff, Google is being forced, and frankly, Apple has already implemented most of this. So Apple is already well ahead of the curve. But Google is starting to deprecate all this information in Chrome at a pretty quick pace. Starting in January, 5% of all third-party cookies are going away. Starting in, I think it's like June or July, they're forecasting that every third-party cookie in Chrome will be removed. Every one of them. So what does that mean for you as an advertiser? Well, what it means is that you are going to want to update to enhance conversions in your Google Ads account because that is going to have up to 30% discrepancy on your conversion data, where you will lose 30% of that value when you don't have that third-party cookie being recognized. And this is a point of context not a lot of people are aware of yet, and Google has been public about it, but not very open about it. So this is happening. You are going to lose third-party cookies entirely in Google Chrome by the beginning of middle next year. So what does this matter when it comes to GA4? GA4 is susceptible to people opting out of tracking. It is a cookie-less environment. And that means if you go to a GDPR compliant site and you say, do not track me, your GA4 does not even load. Your tag manager will not load. And so that code, that GDPR code, will disable those features from firing. So my best practice when it comes to adopting GA4 is setting your expectations correctly. If you have an e-commerce site, as an example, and you look at your, say, WooCommerce data point day over day over day over day, and you match that with your Google Analytics GA4 data, even with a 100% accurate implementation of GA e-commerce tracking, you are guaranteed to see a 12 to 15% discrepancy in revenue. So it is something that cannot be changed. Google is making it to where people can opt out of tracking. Safari has already made that happen. If you have an iPhone or any product where you're using Safari, you are basically opting yourself out of all tracking by just using that browser. So systems like Google Analytics are subject to people voluntarily, essentially allowing themselves to be tracked or not opting out of it. So with that being said, I do want to make sure people recognize that it is going to be discrepant. It is going to have missing data. Your revenue is not going to be a one-to-one. Your sessions are not going to be one-to-one. If you're trying to compare your sessions in HubSpot versus your sessions in Google, just recognize that HubSpot and all those other systems that use pixels, if you opt out of tracking, there is people in that data set that are not necessarily being collected. So when you go to use GA4, you want to make sure you're measuring data with a grain of salt, with an element of error baked in. And if you do that, you'll be able to use the tool with an element of accuracy that is kind of a applied variable where you know that you're going to be missing that 10 to 15% of visual data that you have. It's still on your website. It just isn't trackable because of the system changes and the personal resolution changes happening in the industry. So I hope that's not too overly complex, but I think it's the biggest practice for successfully adopting GA4 is that expectation setting, because it can be very, very confusing and very infuriating when you're trying to figure out, why is this missing data? Why is this revenue not firing? Anything else that any of the TapClicks folks want to add to that? It's a big point of discussion, and I think maybe you guys have other elements to that, but that's for me the biggest thing that people should be aware of.
Yeah, I'm just going to chime in and say I love that was your response, Brian. Certainly on our side, there is a lot of frustration around the things that you just mentioned. I think that's very helpful for folks to hear, is setting those expectations.
It's going to get worse.
And understanding it. Yeah, absolutely. All right.
And for your team at TapClicks, they need to have the confidence to be able to talk to their clients and say, listen, I recognize that your data is not showing one-to-one data, and it's bigger than just you. It's bigger than just us. If you don't, client, know about GDPR, you should educate yourself on it, because you are going to be legally required to comply. California has their own GDPR compliance happening. Colorado has GDPR compliance happening. If you serve clients in either of those two states, you are legally required to comply. It is something that if you're a marketer, a salesperson, a product salesperson, you need to be able to recognize those points of compliance and what it's going to do to your data. If you know very little about this stuff, do some education do some self-educating. It is super important, and it is going to get worse over the next year. It's not going to get better. So being mindful and educated is super important. I cannot stress that enough.
Thank you. So we did have a question about the URL for the TapClicks to GA4 Query Explorer. So we put it, I have a feeling others will have that same question and would love to use the dev tools there. So when we follow up with the recording from today's call, we will include that as well so that you all have it. All right, let's see if there are any other questions, and there are.
Yeah, I would say any YouTube search for this topic is going to pull up a lot of people who nerd out on this and really can take you through what it means. I would start with recognizing, you kind of go down the line. What is GDPR? How does it impact a local business? Do a couple searches on that, first of all. I'm going to say something maybe controversial as well. I hope it's not controversial. You can use ChatGPT to give you an upper hand on this, right? I would go into ChatGPT personally and say, what are third-party cookies? How does it affect my business? If we exclude third-party cookies, what does that happen? Chat has a lot of content that it has indexed from Google on this topic that it can help you to summarize that into layman's terms. And that's the one thing I think Chat does a really good job at, is taking really complex concepts and saying, all right, I'm not technical. Chat, please help me understand this at a layman, terms kind of level, at a beginner level, and then give me resources for how do I educate myself on this. Google has a lot of resources, and it's something that into the last 5 to 10 years, GDPR has been a big push behind this. It's also why Google Analytics GA4 is what it is, because all that Google UA had in their servers has to be deleted for compliance. So it's one of those elements that I think you can definitely recognize the importance of, start to look at the basic, information on it. And there is a ton of content about what it is, how you should be compliant with it. And again, ChatGPT is a really great resource for dumbing that down into a very digestible form, and then maybe even setting you a path for what content should I be reading to update myself on this information.
Wonderful. That was a perfect lead, and we are right at time, actually just a little bit over, but I definitely want to remind folks that ChatGPT is something that we are working on in TapClicks. This is a new feature that we've brought in ChatGPT functionality to help you understand and sort of automate the insights with respect to your the analytics that you need to report on and talk about with your customers. So those features will be coming out for all of you. They are available in our more of a beta environment right now. So we are launching that. We are working through probably the beginning of next year. I don't know, Catherine, if you happen to have any insight on that, but I would say that, by the beginning of next year in Q1, we'll be really ready to go with ChatGPT and helping you sort of demystify the insights that you need to understand and share. So that'll be an exciting addition.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Very cool.
So I do want to round things out and just thank everybody. I want to take a really quick minute to remind folks that Brian from SmartTech is certainly our expert who we rely on heavily here at TapClicks. We are in partnership with SmartTech to help our customers understand Google Analytics and especially GA4. So definitely, please reach out. I don't know, Brian, if you'd like to add anything here, but we rely on Brian,
absolutely.
and you all should too.
Absolutely. I mean, you probably, if you've been in a recent implementation, you might recognize me from your training. I'm really happy to be a part of the training team and implementation team. So when you start with TapClicks with a new client, if you haven't signed up yet, it's likely you might get me as your trainer. I do partner with the CSM team to make sure that new implementations have a really in-depth training opportunity. And then for those who need to scale a TapClicks instance, obviously you have your pro services team that you can reach out to, but things that are outside of pro services like strategy, marketing strategy, how to implement things at a reporting level that take a little bit more of a strategic approach, how to scale this at a fast pace. In these trainings, a lot of times I am here to help you learn how to fish. Whereas if you hire us to come in and build stuff, it's like bringing a fishing boat with all the tools and software to kind of take this to the next level and streamline the process and build it quicker, faster, and ideally in less time than it would take to do it yourself. But with that being said, thank you for everyone's support. Definitely leverage pro services. That team is amazing, and I am here to support that and to supplement that as needed. And obviously, GA4, HubSpot, TapClicks are just a few of the services that we're able to help you guys with if you have questions. And you can reach me directly at brian@smarttech.company. Obviously, SmartTech is with one T. SmartTech.company, that would be the company.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining today. We appreciate it. We will follow up with today's recording, and have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.